Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Berry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Berry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to the Visitors Edition of the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. With us today will be Graham Couch from the Lansing State Journal. But before he joins us, let's get started as we always do with my view from Section 17. I think every game in this rivalry is big. I think there are times we roll our eyes when we hear someone say, throw out the records in this game, they really don't matter. I think we've all learned in this rivalry that is a fact. Not every game is a classic in this series, but they are always hard-hitting and for the most part very competitive. What makes Saturday's game different is that both teams are undefeated and rank in the top 10. This has not happened since 1964, and that was the third game of the season. Never before have these two bitter rivals met this late in the year unbeaten. There is so much on the line. I think the pressure is on Jim Harbaugh and his team, though. As Joel Klatt said after Saturday's Northwestern game, Jim wasn't brought here to go 7-0. He was brought here to beat his rivals and win Big Ten championships. Mel Tucker and his team want this game bad too, and they will be playing in front of a jacked-up home crowd at Spartan Stadium. My guest today says he's not sure either of these teams is worthy of a top 10 ranking. He says they are good. How good? We won't know until late Saturday afternoon as the sun sets over Spartan Stadium. Up next on our Visitors Edition of the Michigan Man is Graham Couch from the Lansing State Journal. So stay with us. Here with us on our Visitors Edition of the show this week is Graham Couch from the Lansing State Journal. Graham, it's once again great to have you back with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Graham, in August, if anyone had told a fan of either Michigan State or Michigan they'd be 7-0 when they met in October with so much on the line, I think we would have dismissed them as a little bit crazy. This is truly a dream game for both fan bases, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a resurgent season, sort of a revival for both programs. And, when you look at the schedule now, it's easy to see how they got to 7-0, playing above expectations, and neither team really has played elite competition yet. But there's no question nobody could have, painted this to go any better on either side.
Well, Graham, when the season started, we knew Michigan State had a lot of new faces. Coach Tucker had reshaped this team in the offseason, in large part via the transfer portal. and that's where he found Kenneth Walker, who was at Wake Forest. Now he leads the nation in rushing. He's a Heisman Trophy candidate. He is an amazing running back, isn't he?
Yeah, the Walker story is interesting. They knew they had something when he showed up, and they did their best to keep it under wraps to some degree. They made it sound like their running back competition and things of that nature. You watch him run, and you realize that he's the guy, and he's made a big difference. Because while I think the offensive line has improved, he is a guy with great vision, good instincts, just a true running back. They've had some guys who maybe were good runners, but not great instinctual running backs for a while. And he's a guy with speed and balance and power, and you just don't get a lot of complete package running backs. And to get a guy like that in the transfer portal who didn't think he fit at Wake Forest, and Wake Forest, to be fair to Wake Forest, who's had a pretty amazing year, they run an offense that's a very much more of a read option where the quarterback is making that read. And I don't think Kenneth Walker like that. I mean, he is best when it's his read on a traditional handoff, and you've seen the effects of that at Michigan State.
Well, he has been outstanding, no question about it. Leads the nation in rushing again. Last year, though, when I watched Michigan State playing, it was a COVID season, but I was impressed with what I saw from Peyton Thorne, especially his decision-making. You can tell he is the son of a coach. He takes care of the ball, makes good reads, gets the ball in the hands of his playmakers. Talk about him and just how good he's been this year.
Well, he's been he's been very good at times and still growing at other times. And I think there were signs at the end of last year in that Penn State game for about a quarter and a half where he was pretty dazzling for a little while, and that they might have something. But you didn't know. There wasn't really a large body of work. He struggled in the rest of that game. They brought in a transfer, and he won a competition there. But he's a very accurate quarterback. And it was never – Brian Lewerke had a lot of strengths, and he was working an uphill battle with some of the other offensive struggles they had in his own development. But he was not a pinpoint accurate passer. That was never his strength, and it was never something he could quite overcome. And yet – and that's where Thorne really excels. I mean, he puts the ball on a dime underneath deep a lot. Now, having said that, what we've seen a little bit is when teams take away that running game and take away that threat, and they become less balanced. He struggled a little bit. He struggled against Nebraska mightily in the second half. He was just okay against Indiana, and so that's something where he's still got to can he, when things aren't going right around him, have one of those? Is he ready to carry a team, carry an offense, put together the sort of drives that are on his arm and legs? And that's something I think. I don't know that he's there yet, but he's an incredibly smart and accurate passer, and so you have to think as a redshirt sophomore, he'll continue to get there.
It helps that he has two big-time receivers who really torched up Michigan's secondary last year, Jaden Reed and Jalen Naylor. These kids are both big-time receivers, aren't they, Graham?
They are. I mean, what's amazing is, in theory, they're both in the program with D'Antonio's final year, and Naylor's just been hurt a lot early in his career, and Reed, they tried to get a waiver to get him eligible, and he wasn't. Reed is somebody that, from talking to people at Western Michigan when he was there and transferring, they knew. That's a program that's had Greg Jennings and several Corey Davis, some really quality NFL receivers. They know what a good NFL receiver looks like, and they looked at Reed and said, that's one of them. So you knew that was potentially eventually coming. And Naylor has always been a guy that just needed to really stay healthy, and has not been able to do so early in his career, and now has, and it's good to see for him. And it's not, they've got Trey Mosley, their third guy, is really good. All of a sudden, you've got this receiving core that is pretty difficult to deal with, and Walker makes that too, because part of the thing is you have to sort of, unless you can really match Michigan State up front, and a couple teams have been able to do that with Indiana and Nebraska, but unless you can do that, it's a pick your poison deal in a lot of ways, and that's trouble.
Well, it's amazing how in just 1 year, Coach Tucker and his staff have fashioned an offense that is balanced and explosive. I mean, the turnaround is incredible to see, isn't it?
What's happened this year the transfer portal allows this to happen, but you just don't expect it in college football.
From 2016 to 2020, State never averaged more than 24.5 points per game. Scoring offense was ranked through that period 104th, 96th, 126th, 104, 116. Now they're 29th in scoring offense, and they're averaging 34.3 points per game. And that answers the question, is this offense for real, doesn't it?
I mean, yeah, it's for real in certain ways. Now, the thing is, if they don't get a push up front and they're unable to run the ball, I mean, you've seen 2 games where they've really stalled. And they are real against competition. I'd say the middle of the Big Ten on down, they are just too good in certain ways against defenses that are middle of the Big Ten and down, and they can, they're just too much. But the problem is physically when they don't win up front, which is still, even though the line is a lot better, and I think the left side of that line with Garrett Horst, the transfer from Arkansas State, and the development of J.D. Duplain has been really strong for them. Michigan, if Michigan can do what Nebraska and Indiana did to them up front and in that front 7, it puts some pressure on Michigan State to try to move the ball in ways that they haven't proven they can do. When the running game is taken away without a lot of extra attention to it, That's been a problem.
Well, over on the other side of the ball, the defense has been very good too. They're top 25 nationally. Sacks 4th, scoring defense 16th, yards per attempt 16th, red zone touchdown percentage 22nd, yards per carry 24th. That kind of production will get you 7-0 against this schedule, won't it?
It's an interesting defense because, I thought this was the year the wheels might really fall off over there, and yet their interior defensive line has been very, very good. They've been pretty good on the edge. Jacob Panasiuk had a fantastic season, very good player. But their interior guys, they've got depth and talent there, and I think they've got a couple of guys that'll play in the NFL eventually. And their safeties are the strength of their defense. So up the middle, they're real strong. And then at linebacker, they only play 2 at a time. And they've got one guy who's just been a real find in Cal Halliday, the young player who was an Antonio recruit, 3-star kid, and doesn't play with any elbow pads or anything. Just got out there, and he really makes a difference. When he was out for the first half against Rutgers after a targeting call at the end of the previous game, and then came back in the second, you just see the difference in that whole defense. And they've got a guy, Quavaris Crouch, a transfer from Tennessee, who's sometimes in the wrong places, which can be an issue. He gets back to the right place very, very fast. He's a prototypical NFL dude once he sort of figures out the position entirely. But and obviously the safety position, their strength. And at corner, they're good enough. Some transfers there who've been, and some of it's been hard to read because in certain matchups they've thought, the way to win is to keep everything in front of them and to make you be patient. And so by design, those corners have played quite a bit off of people and that bend but don't break style. And, that can be an bruising way to play defense for a cornerback, but it's been effective and it's gotten them here.
Well, for those of us from the state of Michigan, this game has always been huge. And for the most part, it's been on national TV in most years, even going back to the 70s and 80s. This Saturday, ESPN Game Day is going to be in East Lansing, and they will be joined by Fox Sports' Big Noon Kickoff team. It is easily the biggest game in the nation this week. Crazy to say, maybe the biggest in the history of this rivalry, Graham?
That's a good question. I think it's the first time they've been undefeated this late against each other. The dynamic is always interesting because you have, I think there's more pressure on Michigan and Harbaugh just because it's year 7 and, he's 3-3 against MSU and 0-5 against Ohio State, and Ohio State all of a sudden looks like a little bit of a juggernaut again, and what happens if they lose this game and then lose that one, or lose that badly. But and for Michigan State, and it would certainly deflate the season, but I don't know that there's a lot of pressure on it. There have been other games. I look at '99 when they met undefeated. That Michigan State team was really trying to that program at that point. Nobody knew Nick Saban was leaving. Ironically, left for LSU, where Mel Tucker is, in the crosshairs, perhaps. But that was a big deal matchup. 97, I think, was a big one, for Michigan, too. And 97, obviously, Michigan won the national title. But that year, they were both undefeated going into the week before they met, and Michigan State then lost the game. And it took a little bit of the shine off that. And then Michigan really dominated the game. I think it was like 24-7 or something like that. And that was and so there have been other games like this. There have been games where they're really big. But certainly, here's the dynamic that I don't think has ever happened quite like this. I don't think there's ever been this combination of optimism and uneasiness from both fan bases. In other words, I don't think either fan base, people will talk trash on social media because that's what you do if you're a fan. But I don't think anybody is really certain that their team has the upper hand. And yet there's this optimism about the game and the overall season. So I don't know that we've ever had this sort of even optimism on both sides, but yet a little uneasiness about whether their team is actually the better team, what will unfold, and what will happen the rest of the year.
Well, you're right. There is a lot of pressure on Jim Harbaugh in his 7th year. He's 500 in the rivalry, so a lot of the Michigan fan base is more than antsy, and we get to hear it all the time. But from what we've seen through the first 7 games, and I've been able to see most of State's games along with Michigan's, again, from what we've seen so far, and considering the intensity of this rivalry, and there are going to be nerves early in that game, there's so much at stake. You would think this has the makings of a classic game, though, doesn't it, Graham?
Well, it does, potentially, because I just don't think either team is, I don't think either one of these teams is truly like a top 5 level team in terms of what we usually think of a top 5 level team. I don't think either team is quite there yet. And so I don't think either one is, but I think they're both really good teams. I don't think either one is likely to pull away from the other. The real question is, can these teams do how they win against each other? Like Michigan, we've seen how they win. Michigan's been incredible running the ball. They've got, 2 very good backs. They run on the edges. They run up, they run off tackle. They do a lot of things very, very well, very impressively. But again, they have not played a lot of great defenses. That said, Michigan State's defensive front isn't, I don't think, better than Nebraska's. So Michigan won that game on the road. And, for Michigan State, there have been teams that have shut them down on the ground to some extent and forced them to go through the air, which has sort of stalled their offense. And can they be an explosive offense against a defense that might be able to do that? And will Michigan's defense do that? So I think there are a lot of questions about whether these two teams can entirely be who they want to be against the other. And if, by chance, one of them can't and the other can, that's the only way you wind up with a game that I think in control of by the other team, which could absolutely happen as well.
Well, final question for you, Graham, before we let you get away. A win for the Spartans Saturday would skyrocket Mel Tucker's program on so many levels. And for Michigan, a win would give Jim Harbaugh momentary breathing room with the still restless element of the fan base. You're right. I don't think either of these teams is as good yet as they're ranked. There's still so much on the line, maybe more than there has been since 1964.
Yeah, certainly in the Michigan side for Harbaugh, I think there's a lot here, and I do think the question is, when you say a lot on the line, I do think that Ohio State has sort of shown that they may be the big dog again in this league. So this is a game with 2 undefeateds who are both going to get their crack at Ohio State, and both have interesting November schedules and all that. But I don't know that – and certainly the loser of it is much less likely to be in contention. But, yeah, there's definitely a huge game feel. There's no question. But here's the other thing, the dynamic is, for Michigan State, they had under D'Antonio, he really flipped the script on a rivalry. Michigan State fans are there's definitely a inferiority complex, right? That's why the little brother comment worked. That's how if that was off base, then nobody would have cared, and it wouldn't be this legacy-defining moment of all this stuff. But the shoe kind of fit until D'Antonio went 8-5. And then when Mel Tucker comes in year 1 as a 25-point dog, and I know Michigan didn't wind up being a very good team, but wins his first game, and it feels like a continuation. It feels like something is, for Michigan State, this is a real opportunity to sort of say that they've got hold of the rivalry right now. And I think there's some, a real opportunity for MSU, real danger for Michigan in that sense. And I think so. There's more to gain for MSU, more to lose for Michigan. But both those dynamics can create, a situation where there's pressure and there's a lot at stake.
Again, the biggest game in college football this week with 2 bitter rivals, and it is going to be fun. Here with us on our visitors edition of the show this week has been Graham Couch from the Lansing State Journal. Graham, as always, thanks for carving out a few minutes for us, and we look forward to our next visit.
I'd love to have it. Take care.
On Quick Hits today, no injury news to update. We'll have to wait until Saturday to see if Zinter, Keegan, and Roman Wilson will be in the lineup. Here are a few game day notes for you. Michigan holds a wide advantage in this series with 71 wins against 37 losses. There have been 5 ties. The first meeting was on October 22nd of 1898 in Ann Arbor, a 39-0 Michigan win. We would like to forget everything about last year, especially losing to Sparty 27-24 at home on October 31st, almost 1 year to the date of this game. Mel Tucker is in his second season as head man in East Lansing. His record is 9-5. Overall, he is 14-12 as a head coach. In last year's COVID season, the Spartans were 2-5. Their last bowl appearance was in the 2019 Pinstripe Bowl. They beat Wake Forest 27-21. The weatherman says it will be cloudy on Saturday with a 34% chance of rain showers during the game. Winds will gust from 10 to 15 miles per hour. The game can be seen on Fox Sports, with kickoff scheduled just after 12 noon. Okay, so all we can do is wait until noon on Saturday to see just how good both of these teams are. If Sparty earns the win, it will be a huge boost for them on so many levels, especially recruiting and bragging rights. If we pull out the victory, and I don't care how we do it, we will be in a great position for the final stretch run. We need this one in a big way. Next week, we'll be back in the Big House to play a struggling Indiana team. Joining us on Thursday's Visitors Edition is the legendary voice of Hoosier football and basketball, Don Fisher. He is in his 48th year behind the microphone in Bloomington. On Tuesday's Michigan Game Day show, our guest will be Jim Brandstatter, who is in his final year calling the action. So make sure you join us. That will do it for this week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. Let's hope we're 8-0 when we get together next week. Think victory, beat Sparty. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!